Cyber Insiders, untold stories from behind the cyber frontline.
Hi, and welcome to Cyber Insiders, the podcast where we look at what it's really like to be on the front line of cybersecurity. I'm Dominique Adams, your podcast host and communications lead at Adarma, one of the UK's leading managed security service providers. And today I'm going to be talking to Cian Heasley, threat lead at Adarma, about DragonForce, the ransomware group believed to be involved in the recent attacks on UK retailers Marks & Spencer, the Co-op and Harrods. Now, by the end of this episode, you'll understand who is behind DragonForce, their evolution as a threat actor, their tactics, techniques and procedures, and importantly, how to defend against them. So without further ado, hi Cian and welcome to the podcast.
Hi Dom, lovely to be here.
So I think we should just dive right in. I mean, this is the key question. Who are DragonForce? Like, who's behind them? Who's driving this? Can you give us a bit more detail about who this threat actor is?
Yeah, of course. So DragonForce are what is known as a Ransomware-as-a-Service gang. So they provide the ransomware encryption malware. They provide the extortion leak site where you can post stolen data. And they will help with services such as calling and harassing potential victims to try and get them to pay extortion. And also they will then also help publicize that victims have been hacked. So they basically fulfill all of those tertiary functions so that affiliates can just get on with actually spreading the ransomware. They don't have to worry about negotiations. They don't have to worry about pressure or anything else.
So when did this group, DragonForce, first come onto the cybersecurity community radar?
So around December 2023, and I'll be honest, they were on my radar to an extent, but they weren't really a large group or a popular group. And that's changed recently. So obviously now they are very much in the news and they're making waves within the ransomware scene itself as well.
So let's talk a little about their TTPs. Can you give us some insight, some info so we know what they're all about?
Their tools, their TTPs as we call them, are similar to a lot of other ransomware groups. So they'll rely on what we call lol bins, so living off the land bins, which are inbuilt to Windows or other operating systems that can be useful for threat actors. So PowerShell, WMIC, and then also obviously tools that are available to all cyber criminals and red teamers as well. Cobalt Strike, Mimikatz, open source tools like Soft Perfect Network Scanner. So they essentially use any tools that are available to them that are either inbuilt to operating systems or that they can easily grab from GitHub or other repositories. And then from there, they'll perform lateral movement, they'll perform data exfiltration. DragonForce offers affiliates inbuilt sort of automated data exfiltration script, which will take data that's been collected for exfiltration and then automatically fire that off to a server that they can then grab and put on their leak site as a means of extorting victims. And they'll also use bring your own vulnerable driver, which is a way that basically threat actors can use vulnerable drivers to, for instance, disable EDR tools. And they'll also, obviously, as we've seen from the M&S breach, they'll go after ESXi infrastructure. So VMware virtualized infrastructure, and then encrypt that and disable means of restoring that easily.
So could you give us some examples of activities DragonForce ransomware have already carried out?
So to be honest, the attacks, if they are actually linked to DragonForce as reported in the press, the attacks on Co-op, Harrods and M&S are probably the largest targets that they've hit in a while. Last year they were linked to an attack on the Ohio State Lottery. They were linked to a spate of attacks against companies in Saudi Arabia. But a lot of their victims in the last couple of years have been small to medium-sized businesses. There have been less high-profile targets.
I've seen, and like you said, there's been a lot of coverage in the news about DragonForce. However, they seem to be they're being referred to as hacktivists gone ransomware-as-a-service model threat actors. I mean, is there any truth to that, or I feel like there was some confusion that the groups are getting mixed up with another group?
Yeah. So. From about 2021 onwards, there's been a group called DragonForce Malaysia, who are a group, they're motivated by, I would say, like Islamist politics. So they attack India, they attack Israel, they attack countries that they perceive to have insulted Islam in some way. They still run an online forum. I think they're still involved in some hacktivist activities. But they themselves released a statement on their official Telegram saying that they were not involved with DragonForce ransomware. And this was a statement released a few years ago, and they said that their own political goals, their own ideology, were opposed to what DragonForce ransomware were doing. It's also worth noting that DragonForce ransomware, from all of the communications I've seen from them, only communicate in a sort of strange English dialect or in Russian. So once again, I haven't seen any comms from DragonForce ransomware, the group themselves, in Malaysian or anything other than English or Russian. So in my mind, the two groups are very much separate until I see, a statement from DragonForce Malaysia saying that they are actually affiliated with the ransomware group, and vice versa. I think this is just a coincidental name that two different groups thought sounded cool and decided to adopt, and that there's been some confusion then in the press over those two group names.
Looking back to DragonForce ransomware, which is the group we're focused on, can you tell us just a bit more about this group, their affiliations? Obviously, we know right now they're allegedly being linked to Scattered Spider. Can you just give us a bit more insight about their group affiliations and known collaborators?
It's interesting right now. There's a sort of almost a soap opera element to what's going on in the primarily the Russian ransomware-as-a-service scene. Lockbit were the big player. Then last year, Lockbit underwent some issues involving law enforcement. I think people lost confidence in them, and affiliates moved to RansomHub. Then RansomHub was the big ransomware player up until earlier this year. And then RansomHub seems to have undergone some sort of a problem whereby their spokesman is no longer posting online on Russian crime forums, and their infrastructure seems to have gone down. Around that time, DragonForce started posting on Russian crime forums saying, we are now merging with RansomHub. And they also had previously attacked another ransomware group called BlackLock and released their private chats and defaced their dark web website. So it seems that DragonForce is very much making a power play right now to take over the ground, the territory that RansomHub had. And RansomHub had been one of the groups that Scattered Spider were partnering with. It makes sense that they would then say, okay, well, if these are the new big players in town, they're offering 80% of ransom payments to the affiliates. So DragonForce keeps 20%, they give 80% back. And they're a brand that Scattered Spider obviously feel can strong arm people in negotiations. They have a perceived strength. Then I think that's where we're at right now. That's why, if it is Scattered Spider, as reported in the media, who have hacked various UK retailers, they would partner with what they see as the up and coming, the big dog in the ransomware scene right now.
So if DragonForce ransomware, if they continue their ascension, what is the implications of that?
So it's interesting. It will. So I'd imagine, based on previous, like who was the big dog before, Lockbit lasted quite a while. Then it was RansomHub. Now there's a few different groups vying for that, especially since Black Basta also ceased operations. It'll be interesting to see how long they can hold on to that position. It'll be interesting to see if they fall afoul of internal politics. And there were some disagreements, I think, with other groups who targeted Russian companies, and obviously Russian ransomware groups or ransomware groups primarily made up of Russians would frown upon that. There was also obviously Conti ransomware group back at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, broke up essentially because some of their affiliates were Ukrainians and didn't agree with the war. So it'll be interesting to see how long they can hold on to that spot, and also if they fall foul of like I said, either internal politics or some kind of sort of hacking scene drama that seems to have engulfed a lot of these groups, where they've had their chats leaked or they've had their ransomware executable code leaked or anything else. Although it does seem like the life cycle of these groups seems to be shrinking. So they seem to occupy the big space for a shorter period of time. The other unknown quantity here is if the US government or the UK government start applying sanctions on DragonForce or trying to sanction entities associated with DragonForce, that might speed up this cycle of them rebranding or maybe falling apart, because if they can't easily, get extortion payments from customers, or if they're seen to have too much baggage in terms of legal issues or anything else, that generally tends to be one of the ways that these groups find themselves falling from a top spot.
Okay, so thinking of it from an organization's perspective, because I'm sure many organizations are feeling slightly nervous given all the headlines recently and the increase in ransomware attacks and the growing potential of the devastation and disruption that they can cause. So if you're an organization, what can you do to strengthen your cyber resilience and to prepare yourself for this, I hate to use a term that's well and truly overused, the ever-evolving cyber landscape. So what do you think is the first protocol for an organization that wants to strengthen its cyber resilience?
Yeah, so it's very important to understand where your security controls, where your detection abilities, where all of your exposure, whether it's internet connected to devices or servers or anything else. It's important to understand where you're at there, and then to either, within your own company work out a roadmap for covering the kind of TTPs that we'll see with groups like DragonForce, or to put in place a stringent incident response plan with backup comms, all of the things that you would need if, the worst came to worst and there was a ransomware attack. And I would say something like tabletop exercises as well. So to get people in your company involved in making sure that they understand, what might happen if there was a ransomware attack, how they would react themselves, what would be needed of them and their departments, who they should get in touch with, all of the important things that you don't want to leave till the last minute when, things have gone wrong, or there's been even an attempted attack like we've seen with some UK retailers here.
For me, I'm just wondering, like, if you're already an established company, but this incident or, the recent headlines, the increase in ransomware attacks has really prompted you to reconsider your own cyber resilience. What do you do? Like, where do you go from where you're at the moment? Like, how do you figure out where your blind spots are, what you need to protect, and what you can do to make the tools you have, your current cyber investments or your future planned cyber investments, how do you make them really work for you? I suppose I'm just curious, like, where do you go from where you're at the moment?
So medium-sized companies, smaller companies, even some larger companies just simply don't have the cybersecurity staff, the skills and knowledge base within the company to maybe tackle something that could result in like a massive incident like we've seen with the UK retailers that have been hit. So, there's always third parties then. You can go for managed SOC services. You could go for some consultancy services to help you build out a roadmap to improve your resilience, as you said earlier, to make sure that you're covering the points that you need to make sure that you understand the threats that are out there. So whether it's groups like DragonForce or, groups that are running phishing as a service campaigns, if you have OT infrastructure, you might need some help there with understanding, how to make sure that you're covering that safely, that you're doing vulnerability management, all of these things. And there's always, the option of going to third parties.
Thank you. I think that's been very informative, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Thanks very much.
To our listeners, thanks for joining us, and we hope you found this an informative episode. If you're concerned about DragonForce or you'd like to learn more about how Adarma helps organizations fortify their cyber resilience, you can get in touch with us at hello@adarma.com, or you can visit our website, which you'll find at www.adarma.com. So, until next time, you stay safe out there.
Cyber Insiders from Adarma. Follow and rate on your podcast app. Together, we've got this.